Talk to us about journaling and why journaling is so important. Now, guys, listen, this is going to be a man law. Men don't have diaries. They have journals. Why is journaling so important?
If we can understand that the path to breaking this is going to be through a successful identity change, then we must understand who we actually see ourselves as.
Mm-hmm.
And I think journaling is one of the greatest practices in doing that. We have an exercise we do inside of our program. It's called our evening reflection journaling. And it's literally 5 to 7 minute exercise. And all I ask of these men is I want you to spend some time every single night thinking about what you've been thinking about. You know, depending upon the survey, or the research that you look at, somewhere between 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts make their way through our brain or mind every single day. We're not in full control of all of these. These thoughts just appear randomly. Sometimes we're like, where did that even come from? So we're not really paying attention to these things. But how do you begin to change the way that you respond to these thoughts? Like subconsciously, is you need to get clear on what these thoughts actually mean to you. So I had a psychiatrist or psychologist, Dr. John Schinnerer, on the show recently, a couple of months back, and he dropped a phrase that I never heard before called metacognition. And what metacognition is when you open up this gap. So are you familiar with Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl?
You know what? I've heard the book. I haven't read it.
Yeah. I think it's a must read for everybody. But Victor was he was a psychiatrist. He actually was an Auschwitz prisoner.
Yep.
So
Yep.
The book was kind of rooted out of his kind of breakthrough that he had there. But he's got this quote from the book that in between stimulus and response, there's a gap. And within that gap lies our ability to choose. And it's within our ability to choose lies our freedom. So as we're talking about freedom from bondage, as we're talking about freedom from pornography, we must realize that we have a choice in every single moment. There's a stimulus, there's something externally outside of you that triggers a thought, and then most addicts react. Most addicts will react almost unconsciously to trigger a response. Now they're already in their habit. But if you could spend time every single day in metacognition or thinking about what you've been thinking about, you begin to open up that space. So now when that thought comes throughout the day, you're aware of it. You're like, oh, I was actually journaling on this 2 days ago. I know this feeling. I know this thought. Now, instead of reacting, you open up this gap to where you now have the ability to respond versus react. See, animals react. Like if I go poke, my dog is sitting on the floor here next to me. If I go poke him, like he may get angry, he may snap at me. That's a reaction. Human beings, we possess the ability to stop, pause, and then respond. And there's a big difference between a reaction and a response. Reaction happens unconsciously, a response happens through the conscious level. So I think that's one of the biggest takeaways is we begin to understand at a deeper level, we begin to possess the ability to pause in the moment when we're triggered, when those thoughts come, and instead of naturally reacting to our old default patterns of behavior, we now can make those proper choices to reprogram new patterns of behavior that we're trying to create for ourselves. So for me, I don't know, if there's other things that people get out of that. That for me has been the biggest, takeaway from journaling, and it's one of the most powerful parts of our program that men tell me all the time. Like, I've never known this much about who I am, why I think these certain things. Like, it's radically transformative.
And I think that guys don't bridge that gap through this metacognition phase. They don't sit down and think about what they're thinking about. They just kind of do. It's kind of how men are wired. But I think it's important. It's important for us men to take time and think. In fact, the greatest leaders in history were great thinkers. They thought about stuff and got away a lot to think and take times in silence and do that. And so I think journaling has been a massive benefit in my life, and I think it will be for these men. I think a journal is important. But hey,